How's it going, everybody? My name is Lucky Buns, and in today's video I'm going to be going over the best Shadow Pokemon to farm from Team Go Rocket Grunts in Pokemon Go. Now, as always, if you guys do end up enjoying this video, please make sure to smash that like button down below. It helps me out a ton with the YouTube algorithm. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So about 2 weeks ago, we got a brand new rotation of Pokemon from the Team Go Rocket Grunts, as well as the Team Go Rocket leaders. If you're curious about which of those Pokemon are meta relevant, check out this video right here in the top right corner. But this video is going to go over all of the Rocket Grunt Pokemon, and we definitely have a lot to talk about, so I'm just going to jump straight into it. So I know a very common question I'm going to get asked during this video is why can't I TM Frustration off my Shadow Pokemon? Well, Niantic has actually implemented it so you can only TM Frustration during certain events, and we recently just had one. So the next time that you can probably TM Frustration is going to be about 2 to 4 months out. I know it's a long time away, but trust me, it's going to take you a bit of time to grind out some good IVs on these Shadow Pokemon anyways. Now, one more thing that I would like to point out is that for the most part, you're only going to be able to catch that Slot 1 Pokemon from the Rocket line. You do have a chance to get the Slot 2 Pokemon, but there's only a 15% chance, and it's only on certain typings. So for example, you can actually get the Slot 2 Pokemon from a Water typing or a Grass typing, but if it's a Fairy typing for the Rocket Grunt, you can only get the Slot 1 Pokemon. But I'll make sure to kind of go over this stuff in detail as I'm going through which of these Pokemon are going to be meta relevant. And if you guys are struggling with beating these Team Go Rocket Grunts, or you want to beat them even faster, let me know in the comment section down below. I do have an excellent strategy that I personally use to get through these battles really fast. Now with that out of the way, let's finally dive into which of these Pokemon are going to be meta relevant, starting with the Water type Pokemon. Okay, so I am going to cover both the Raid/Gym meta as well as the PvP meta in this video, so in case you guys like either or, I got you covered. Alright, so for the water types, the main ones that we have here are going to be Psyduck and Mudkip in the first slot, and then you have a 15% chance to get Shelter or Wartortle potentially. So the Pokemon that are going to be meta relevant here is just Mudkip. So Mudkip evolves into Swampert, and Swampert is phenomenal. So Swampert has really good play in the Great League, it also has really good play in the Ultra League, Master League Premier Cup, Ultra League Premier Cup, and it is really good in the Raid/Gym meta, so Swampert is amazing. The downside here is that you're going to have to use an Elite TM to get Hydro Cannon at this point. We do sometimes get events that allow us to get the Hydro Cannon move, or the Frenzy Plant move, or the Blast Burn move, but we don't really know when that's going to happen, or if that's going to happen anytime soon. Now, given that Shadow Swampert is both relevant in the PvP meta as well as the Raid meta, you're going to want different IV spreads for both. With that being said, I'm sure some of you are probably a little bit confused in terms of what I mean. So for PvP, ideally you want to have low attacks, so something like 0 attack, 15 defense, 15 HP would be really solid. But for the Raid meta, you're going to want to have 15, 15, 15 across the board. Now, if that doesn't really make sense to you, I'm going to leave a link to a video in the top right hand corner right now that should give you a complete overview on PvP IVs in Pokemon Go and how to actually calculate your Pokemon to see where they stand in the meta. Now, when it comes down to Shadow Swampert, if we exclude the Megas and the Primal forms, Shadow Swampert is actually the #1 water type attacker in the game. So if you end up getting really good IVs on your Shadow Mudkip, I would definitely recommend investing an Elite TM into that Shadow Swampert because you can use it for both the Raid/Gym meta as one of the top water type attackers in the game, excluding Mega Pokemon, and you can also use it in the Master League, so it's definitely a win-win scenario. Now, following Swampert, I do have one more water type Pokemon I'd like to go over, and that is going to be Magikarp, which evolves into Gyarados with 400 candy. Now, Gyarados is another Pokemon that is just extremely good. So it isn't as good as Shadow Swampert in the Raid/Gym meta, but it's definitely close, and it's a good contender. It kind of falls below Kyogre, so if you already have Kyogre, I wouldn't worry too much about using this. But Shadow Gyarados has play in the Great League, Ultra League, and Master League very similar to Shadow Swampert, so you could kind of go either or. Now, unfortunately, if you do end up getting a good IV spread Shadow Magikarp and you want to get Aqua Tail during December Calm Day, there is no way to actually do that if your Pokemon does have Frustration, which it obviously will, so it's a really bad design flaw in my opinion, because I feel like if you have that secondary charge move, you should be able to evolve it and then get the exclusive Calm Day moveset. But I guess for whatever reason, Niantic doesn't want you to be able to get that exclusive Calm Day moveset without using an Elite TM only after Frustration is removed, so yeah, I don't know how I feel about that, but it is what it is. With that being said though, when you are able to TM Frustration away again and you do have to use that Elite TM on Gyarados, It's definitely worth it, especially in the Ultra League and the Master League, so don't feel too bad about using one. It is absolutely a great contender. Moving on from the Water-type Pokemon, let's talk about the Grass-type Pokemon next, and we definitely got some great contenders here. So in the first slot, we're going to have Cacnea and Turtwig, and then in slot 2, we're going to have Tangela and Ivysaur. Once again, for slot 2, you have a 15% chance to get these Pokemon. So taking a look at Turtwig first, this Pokemon evolves into Torterra in its final evolution form, and while it doesn't have the best meta relevance in the PvP meta, it's actually ranked as one of the best Grass-type attackers in the raid meta, so definitely a good Pokemon worth using. But that is only with its exclusive Comday moveset, Frenzy Plant. So you probably will have to use an Elite TM if you want to run this, and I wouldn't really recommend it. It's definitely not the greatest, you know, it's really good, but to use an Elite TM, I mean, I would probably pass. Taking a look at the slot 2 Pokemon though, we have two really good options here. So we have Tangrowth, which is going to be really good in the Ultra League, and then we also have Ivysaur, which evolves into Venusaur. And this Pokemon is going to be really good in the Great League as well as the Ultra League, actually one of the top Pokemon to use, so definitely do recommend going with this. So when it comes down to deciding if you want to use an Elite Charge TM, Venusaur is by far one of my best recommendations. Now the really cool thing about Shadow Tangela when it evolves into Shadow Tangrowth is that it actually outranks Shadow Torterra and it doesn't need a Comday moveset. The ideal moveset that you're going to want to have is going to be Vine Whip plus Power Whip. And if we go ahead and exclude the Mega Pokemon, Shadow Tangrowth is the second best Grass-type attacker in the game, right behind Zarude, which is the mythical Pokemon. So yeah, this is going to be one you definitely want to get a good IV spread on if possible. We've talked about Water-type Pokemon, we've talked about Grass-type Pokemon, it only makes sense that we talk about Fire-type Pokemon next, and we got some more really solid options here. So actually everything that's in the rotation right now that is catchable is meta-relevant. So we have Vulpix and Charmander in slot 1, and then we have Magmar and Charmeleon in slot 2. So we're going to go ahead and start off with Vulpix, and then we'll kind of move on over to Charmander, which evolves into Charizard, and that's kind of a detailed Pokemon I do want to spend some time on. So Vulpix evolves into Ninetales, which is going to be really good in the Kanto Cup. It's actually ranked number 6 in the Kanto Cup, which comes back every single season in Pokemon Go Battle League. This is a really good Pokemon you want to get a good IV spread on for the Great League. Then when it comes down to Magmar, so this evolves into Magmortar, and this Pokemon is really solid in the Ultra League Premier Cup as well as the Master League Premier Cup. Now I do want to mention that this Pokemon probably isn't worth using an Elite Charge TM on, so don't worry about it too much. Now with that being said though, when it comes down to Charmander and Charmeleon, which evolve into Charizard, that's going to be an Elite TM probably worth using to get Blast Burn. Alright, so let me break this down because this one's a little bit more complicated. So Charizard has two exclusive Comday movesets because for whatever reason we got two Comdays of it. So the first one is going to be Blast Burn, that is a charge move, and the second one is going to be Dragon Breath, that is a fast move. So if you want to go for Dragon Breath, which is definitely a recommendation in my opinion because that is really, really solid in the Ultra League, you can evolve it during this December Comday, and because it's a fast move, you should be able to get it. I don't really see why you wouldn't be able to get it because Frustration is a charge move. That being said though, you're still going to have to use an Elite Charge TM to get Blast Burn on that Charizard once you eventually do remove Frustration from the next event. It is a pretty heavy investment, but it is absolutely one that I would recommend, especially for the Ultra League. Charizard is extremely good, especially Shadow Charizard. Like, there are some good teams that you can definitely run with Shadow Charizard, Dragon Breath, and Blast Burn. Now when it comes down to Charizard in the raid meta, honestly, I wouldn't worry about this one too much. Regular Charizard, which has the ability to Mega Evolve, is going to be a much better option for you rather than Shadow Charizard, because you can also just get Reshiram, which is a legendary Pokemon, and that's actually much better than Shadow Charizard, and you don't need an Elite Charge TM to actually get Blast Burn. Shadow Charizard for PvP is going to be an excellent investment, but Shadow Charizard for the raid/gym meta probably can skip that one. With the starter typings out of the way, let's move on over to our next typing, which is going to be Ground. So we have Cubone and Sandshrew, which are the only catchable Pokemon. You can't actually get the slot 2 Pokemon. Not that you would really want them, but really everything from the ground type section is kind of trash. They don't have relevance in the raid meta or the PvP meta, just skip them entirely. Following that, we have the fighting type Pokemon. Once again, you cannot get their slot 2 Pokemon, so Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee are going to be the Pokemon that are going to be available to you. Hitmonlee is going to be a definite pass. Hitmonchan does have some play in the Great League, Ultra League Premier Cup, and the Kanto Cup, but it's more of a spice option. What really sucks about the fighting type category is that you can't actually catch the slot 2 Pokemon, which does have Machop, so that would be the most meta-relevant Pokemon out of this category, but unfortunately you just can't catch it, so kind of a rip there. Taking a look at our next category though, we're going to have flying type Pokemon as well as poison type Pokemon. I'm just going to go over these two together. So for flying type, you have two options here. You have Starly and Zubat. Both of these Pokemon are 1k Purification Pokemon, so they're going to be really good for your Purification Medal, and Zubat is actually going to be the meta-relevant one. So Starly, which evolves into Staraptor, is also meta relevant, but you're better off just using the regular version and not the Shadow version. Zubat, on the other hand, though, evolves into Golbat, which then evolves into Crobat. Golbat is going to be really good for the Great League with the Poison Fang update, and the same thing can be said for Crobat in the Ultra League. With that being said, Crobat actually became one of the most meta-relevant and frequently used Pokemon that I saw in the Ultra League Premier Cup, so if you don't already have a good IV Crobat for the Ultra League, you really want to prioritize this one. Like, I cannot stress that enough. And then taking a look at the Poison type category, we do have Zubat there once again, so I already talked about this, and then we have Nidoran, the male version. So, I mean, nothing too crazy. Zubat, again, is going to be the one that you want to focus on. Since we just talked about 1K purifications, I think it's a good time to take a look at the normal type category. So we're going to have Bidoof and Teddiursa in slot 1, and then we're going to have Raticate and Bibarel in slot 2. So if you're going for that purification medal or the level 44 requirements, this is going to be a good one to focus on. Teddiursa is not a 1K purification, but it does have some decent play in the Ultra League. Honestly, I'm not going to go over this one too much. Ursaring is very much of a spice pick. So those typings are definitely some of the more basic categories, but why don't we talk about something that's a little bit more interesting, the electric type category. So we definitely got some good options here. We have Magnemite and Electrike in slot 1, and then in slot 2 we have Electabuzz and Magneton. So for Magnemite, its final evolution is going to be Magnezone, and this Pokemon has amazing play in the Great League, Ultra League, and Master League. And not only that, it is one of the top attackers in the raid meta as well for electric type Pokemon, so Shadow Magnezone is kind of the best of both worlds here. Either you can get a really good IV spread for Great League or Ultra League, or you get a really high IV spread for the Master League as well as the raid/gym meta. Now additionally, on top of that, Shadow Magneton, which is the second stage form in this evolution line, also has some decent play in the Kanto Cup. So yeah, Magnemite in the Shadow form, gonna be a really, really good one to farm. So obviously Shadow Magnemite's gonna be worth farming, but what about Electabuzz? How is that Pokemon gonna do? Well, Electabuzz evolves into Electivire, which has play in not only the Great League, but also the Ultra League Premier Cup, as well as the Master League Premier Cup, and it's going to be meta-relevant in raids. So once again, you definitely get the best of both worlds here. So the Electric-type Pokemon, oh man, do not skip this. I mean, I understand Electrike is kind of the pass here, but hopefully you can get Magnemite, and hopefully you can even get Electabuzz as well. Next up, it looks like we're going to have Bug-type Pokemon, another great category. So in slot 1, we're going to have Weedle and Venomoth, and then in slot 2, we're going to have Skorupi, Beedrill, and Kakuna. So Shadow Beedrill is going to be an excellent investment, but the downside is that you're going to have to use an Elite Charge TM to get Drill Run on it, which, I mean, again, you only have so many Elite Charge TMs, make sure that you're using them carefully, but this is a pretty solid option as well. Now following that, we do have 2 more Pokemon that I'd like to go over here. The next one is going to be Venomoth in the slot 1 category. So this Pokemon does have a very niche use in the Great League. And then finally, the last Pokemon is going to be Skorupi, which evolves into Drapion, and this Pokemon does have some pretty good meta relevance in the Great League as well as the Ultra League. So specifically during the Remix Cup this season, Drapion was actually one of the top Pokemon. Unfortunately, I can't show you that graph right now because it's not available on PvPoke, but for the Ultra League, it's going to be a really strong contender. So you definitely got some good options with the Bug-type category, but let's keep it going here. Rock-type Pokemon are up next. So the only Pokemon in this category that's going to be meta-relevant is going to be Larvitar, which should be self-explanatory. This Pokemon is not going to be meta-relevant in PvP, but it is going to be extremely meta-relevant as a Rock-type attacker and a Dark-type attacker in the raid meta. It is the top of the meta, guys. Like, it is literally the top of the meta. The downside, though, is that you're going to have to use an Elite Fast TM to get Smackdown if you want to use it for a Rock-type Pokemon, but if you want to use it as a Dark-type Pokemon, no Elite TMs are going to be necessary. So we got a few more typings to go over right now. The next category is going to be Dark-type Pokemon. So in slot 1, you're going to have Houndour and Poochyena, and then in slot 2, you're going to have Cacturne, Nuzleaf, and Sableye. So I usually recommend going against this, but when it comes down to Houndour, if you end up getting a good IV spread that could potentially be a Hundo, I would purify it for the Mega Form. The reason I say this is because when it comes down to the Fire-type meta as well as the Dark-type meta, you have so many other good options out there that Shadow Houndoom isn't actually worth investing in for the amount of Stardust that you have to spend. Now, for those of you who don't know, when you actually purify a Pokemon, the IV spread goes up +2 by every single category. So for example, if you end up getting like a 13, 14, 13 on your Shadow Houndour, you can purify it to get the Hundo, which in this case, it's actually worth going for. Poochyena isn't really meta relevant, but it is a 1K purification, so that Pokemon's going to be worth it for that reason alone. When it comes down to Nuzleaf, which evolves into Shiftry, this Pokemon is going to be pretty good in the Great League, so definitely a good contender right there. You could honestly run either moveset. You don't have to actually have the Calm Day moveset, although it would help. It's not completely required. And then Sableye, of course, is going to be a really solid Pokemon to use in the Great League, actually one of the best Pokemon to use. Unfortunately, you only have a 15% chance to get it in this category, but if you end up getting like a really good IV spread on this Sableye, purifying it to get Return is going to be your best option. I mean, you're going to have to get the extra large candy as well, but trust me when I say this, Purified Sableye is one of the best Pokemon to use in the Great League by a mile. And since we're already talking about Purified Sableye, let's just go over the Ghost type section as well. You can only get the slot 1 Pokemon in this specific category, but your Pokemon are going to be Mischievous and Sableye, so pretty good odds of getting a good Sableye if you keep farming this one. Next up, let's talk about the Fairy type Pokemon. Once again, you can only get the slot 1 Pokemon from this specific line. And your options are going to be Ralts and Snubbull, both which actually have extremely good meta relevance in PvP as well as the Raid/Gym meta. So Ralts actually has a split evolution for those of you who don't know. It can either evolve into Gardevoir or it can evolve into Gallade with the Sinnoh Stone if it's a boy. Now Gardevoir does actually have a little bit more play in the meta for PvP opposed to Gallade, which is really only good in the Ultra League Premier Cup. Gardevoir is actually pretty solid in the Great League as well as the Ultra League Premier Cup, and then also the Master League Premier Cup if you end up getting like a really high IV spread. It's actually ranked really well, but most people don't have one because it's really hard to get, or at least it was really hard to get before. And then when it comes down to the Raid meta, Gardevoir is actually the #1 Fairy type attacker in the game, which is actually insane. So not only are you going to get the meta relevance of having it for the Raid/Gym meta, but you're also going to have a really good Pokemon for the Master League Premier Cup. Which, let me just tell you this right now, after just hitting Legend in the Master League Premier Cup, Double Charm is extremely broken. Now, Granbull is actually another really solid option for the Raid/Gym meta as a Fairy type attacker, and then you also have the meta relevance in the Great League as well as the Ultra League, so yeah, if you get good IVs for the PvP version, definitely worth investing into. Only a few more categories left. The next big one is probably going to be the Ice type categories. Let's cover this right now. So you have a few different options here. In slot 1, you have Spiel and Swinub, and then in slot 2, you're going to have Snover and Cloyster. Cloyster is worth skipping, don't worry about that one. Spiel, when it evolves into Silo, which is its second stage form, actually has some decent play in the Great League, so honestly, it's worth considering if you end up getting a good IV spread. Outside of that, not really worth it that much. Now, when it comes down to Swinub, which evolves into Mamoswine in its final evolution, this Pokemon is actually the #1 best Ice type attacker to use in the game. So if you get a really high IV spread on your Shadow Swinub, absolutely worth investing into. Now when it comes down to PvP for this Pokemon, honestly in the Master League Premier Cup, you could really go either way, either with the regular or the Shadow. I personally have the regular already built, so for me it's fine, but I guess if you're already investing into it for the Ice meta, well I guess it wouldn't hurt to build it for Master League Premier Cup as well and just add that secondary charge move. You've already invested into it this much. I kinda wish I went over this typing earlier, but we're gonna talk about Psychic type Pokemon next. So in this line we have Abra and Ralts in slot 1, and then in slot 2 we actually have Metang, which evolves into Metagross. In my opinion, Abra is definitely worth skipping because Alakazam in its non-shadow form is already super glassy. With the shadow bonus, it's going to be extremely fragile. We already talked about Ralts, so I don't need to go over that one again, but when it comes down to Metagross, which evolves from Metang, oh man, Metagross by itself in its non-shadow form is already super good in the Master League Premier Cup as well as the Raid/Gym meta as a Steel type attacker. Give it the shadow bonus and it becomes one of the absolute best. So if you end up getting a good IV spread on this thing, oh my god, do not hesitate to give it an Elite Charge TM. You are not going to regret it. We have 2 more categories left and the next one is going to be Dragon typing. So you only get one option from this one, that is going to be Dratini, which evolves into Dragonite in its final evolution form. Shadow Dragonite is a top type Dragon type attacker in the game, absolutely worth going for if you end up getting a really high IV spread. It is also really good in the Ultra League, so you could really go either or if you get a good IV spread for PvP or for Master League. The only downside here is that Rocket Grunts with Dragon type Pokemon are extremely rare to find, so if you end up getting one, do not skip it. And then finally the last category is going to be Typeless, which essentially is just for Snorlax, and Snorlax is going to be a really good Pokemon to use in the Ultra League Premier Cup as well as the Master League Premier Cup. With that being said, that should pretty much cover all of the best Shadow Pokemon to farm during this rotation for the Team Go Rocket Grunts. You definitely have a lot of options here, so let me know in the comments section down below what you're going to be going after the most. I think that's everything I got for you guys though, but in case you want some more tips and tricks, check out these videos right here, but before you go, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you all real soon in the next one.